Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Future.Now and our final webinar to round out Digital Skills Week. And what a fantastic week it has been. So firstly, thank you to all of you for joining us today. It has been a mammoth week, so thank you for sort of joining many of the sessions. Over the 6 events that Future.Now has run, we've had 27 excellent speakers. I think over 300 people participating and countless social media messages. So in terms of raising awareness of the agenda, a big round of applause. So I think you can all give yourself a big round of applause for that. In terms of rounding out the week, our agenda today is really split into 2 parts. Shortly, I'm going to introduce the panel to discuss taking on board what we've garnered this week, but also how we continue to upskill UK PLC. But before that, I'm going to shortly ask Liz Williams, our fantastic CEO at Future.Now, to give us her reflections on the week. In terms of mechanics, what I would ask in order to sort of manage bandwidth and visibility and everything else, for those who are audience participation for the start, can I ensure that you're on mute? And for the first part, perhaps take yourself off video so that for the speakers as we get onto the panel, they have sort of front and center view. And then when we get into the Q&A, by all means, either ask your questions through the chat line, or if you'd like to do that, just indicate and I'll bring you online and you can open up your video and audio. So without further ado, may I have a great pleasure in introducing Liz Williams to give us her reflections on Digital Skills Week. Liz, over to you.
Thanks very much, Peter. Well, what a week. We've had, as Peter said, we've had 6 events actually over 5 days, and it's been a whole new approach for us. We were expecting to run one face-to-face event in London, and we were talking about going out to the regions as well, but certainly we weren't expecting to run a whole week of activity. And it's given us an opportunity to test our own digital skills at times and to explore the Digital Leaders platform as well as Zoom for the delivery mechanism. But really it's given us an opportunity to work with you to deep dive into our approach and our strategic priorities at Future.Now. And we're a relatively youthful organisation, having only been launched last October as part of Peter's closing part of his mayoral year in the City of London. And as I shared, for those of you that were on the call on Monday as part of our kickoff event, I talked about the 4 pillars of work that we've got, which are around, first of all, standing up this new organisation and what it needs to look like, building that coalition. And we're delighted with the level of commitment we've now got from across industry and from other partners. Our very big work stream around facilitating change, about what are the things that we actually need to happen to advance the digital skills agenda. And then, of course, comms and reputation, and this event is very much part of that strand of work. But we've been focused on 5 strategic issues: how we understand that digital skills gap, how we get everybody to that starting line of the essential digital skills for life and work, how we lean into the current problem of digital skills activities operating in silos, and how we really start to work together to close the gaps and use content more strategically. And I'm very excited about the panel we've got today, because that's very much playing into that part of our activity. Also, I think that recognizing that everybody is individual, and whilst we can all talk about digital skills gaps, it's much more important to actually think about what it is the individual needs and how do we help them see digital part of their way forward. And then finally, our work around motivation, or as we now talk about it, motives, which very much leans into that piece around people being individuals. So over the course of the week, we've done a deep dive into each of those areas, really, with help from colleagues from across the coalition. And on Monday, our kickoff event, we did a deep dive into what COVID-19 means for digital skills and what that means for us at Future.now. We had a brilliant session led by Professor David Gann with a really great panel. We had Julie Elliott MP. Perhaps, Paulina, if you could show the next slide, please. We had Julie Elliott MP, who chairs the all-party group on digital skills. We had Sheridan Ash from PwC, who set up the Tech She Can program, and we also had Carol Lazelle from Nationwide, and they were really reflecting on how that crisis has affected people, but what it means for their dependency on digital. And you know, it was really encouraging to hear some of their reflections. Particularly, Julie was talking about it from a more strategic perspective, but then we had Carol sharing some really practical examples of what they were seeing on the ground in Nationwide as people realised that they needed to use digital skills to access their money, and suddenly a whole new change in motivations. And that leads us neatly on to Tuesday, when our first session in the morning was with the team from Oliver Wyman, and they were sharing the work that they've been doing with us on the motivation gap. And there were three big insights that came from that. One was, you know, you need to think about people and find their motive and their real goals. We need to teach people to teach, and Charity from Nationwide was talking very, very powerfully about how building the confidence of the colleague team in the Nationwide Building Society meant that they were actually better able to help their customers achieve their goals through digital. It was all about train the trainer and how that works, and that was very much part of the research that came through from the team at Oliver Wyman. And then we were delighted to be joined by Alan from Liberty, and he was talking about some work that they've been doing with young people, working around a podcast and a platform called This Is How, which is all about how do you inspire young people to see digital skills as something that's important to them and digital careers. And actually it was all about speaking their language, and they've used entertainment. So what they've done with their podcast is they've used the kind of opinion leaders that really matter to young people, and they speak in their language. And I had to laugh because when Alan was first showing me the platform, he said, "You're going to hate it, Liz, and that means I've done my job really well because this is for young people." And I wasn't offended at all at that point. Anyway, that was a really brilliant session on motivation, and I encourage you to go and have a look at the research that Oliver Wyman has done and the outputs from that, and you can find that on our website at future.now.uk/motivation. It was a double dip day on Tuesday. In the afternoon, we were joined by Debbie Forster, CEO of the Tech Talent Charter, to explore the work that they've done building a diversity and inclusion playbook, trying to join that landscape. And I'm very conscious that there was an opportunity to learn from them and see whether some of what the problems that they'd seen and the way that they'd solved them may have resonance for our work on digital skills. And there were three big takeouts from there. You can read them on the slides. There was a genuine sense that there was need to help us navigate that landscape better, and that there were synergies from the work that the Tech Talent Charter have used for that playbook that they've created. And finally, that it wasn't a once and done piece of work, but actually you need to have something that would be a living resource that could be updated. And certainly Debbie and the team at Tech Talent Charter have really explored that area. So it's something we're looking at moving forward with, and I'm very pleased that that's given us some additional insights as we work through the tools part of our work at Future.now. So thank you to everybody that contributed on that call on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we took a slightly different tack, and we moved in to talk about our work with large employers. And I was delighted that we had the Good Things Foundation with ASDA talking about the workshop that they've been doing together as part of the Future.now coalition, really looking at what ASDA needed from their work and how to really bring their employee workforce around this as something that was important to them as a retailer, but also as a community leader as well. And Andrew from ASDA made some very stark comments about what they'd seen as a grocer as a result of COVID-19, about the double-digit take-up in terms of online, how they had to build extra capacity in their network, but also how they'd seen people genuinely struggling with that. So that was really helpful. But we also had the team from Lloyds Banking Group, who are much further along their digital journey. They've been trailblazers in this space for many years. And listening to Gemma and Andrew literally just kind of exploring that conversation and talking about how they'd worked together in that workshop with ASDA colleagues, it was really motivating for me to really see the power of the coalition come alive there. But there were 5 big takeouts from there. One was learn from others, and Andrew talking about how it was brilliant to hear from Good Things Foundation and Lloyds, and for them to be bringing things that he perhaps hadn't thought of. Talking about how important it was to get some quick wins, to be able to show people that this was able to be something that would move quickly. Showing leadership commitment, and Gemma was sharing some of the tricks that they'd used at Lloyds to make sure that their senior team were really engaged with their work. They talked about the need for trailblazers and to constantly reiterate that case for change. And Lloyds were talking about just how different the requirements now to perhaps when they'd started off on their journey. And I think that was very compelling content. And it was also very helpful to have Robin Christopherson from AbilityNet join us as well, talking about what it means to be a really inclusive workforce and what digital skills can do for those who've got disabilities. And so that was a very, very powerful session on Wednesday. Thursday, things took a slightly different tone as we had the launch of the Consumer Digital Index in the morning from Lloyds Banking Group, and an afternoon session exploring that index and those new findings in more depth from a business and employer perspective. I say they're new findings, and they are new findings, but actually for me, they were quite disappointing because the numbers in terms of the number of people who have the essential digital skills for life and the numbers that have the essential digital skills for life and work have not moved dramatically. Important to say, though, that this research was conducted pre-COVID, and what Lloyds have done is they've done a YouGov survey subsequently to kind of try and understand exactly what's been happening during this 8-9 weeks of lockdown, as I'm sure you, like me, have uplifted your own digital skills. One of the things that I would call out from that report is the quite stark stat that's on the screen now, that only 23% of people have received digital skills training and support from their employer. And that's one of the facts and stats that when Peter and I were first talking about Future.Now was one that we really felt was something that us as a coalition of industry could really work together to get everybody up to that digital skills starting line, and with Future.Now helping employers see that role that they can play there. The other thing I would say about Thursday is we heard some very powerful storytelling from Hafsha, a community leader from the West Midlands, on the impact of COVID-19 on very vulnerable people in her community. Hafsha was talking about how the emergency campaign that we have set up from Future.Now, Devices.Now it's called, to help people take their first steps online with the device and connectivity and support from somebody like Hafsha. I think you could have heard a pin drop as Hafsha spoke about those stories there. And if you want to get one story, I'd encourage you to see that link there with the crowdfunder. You don't have to come and give us any money, but I would encourage you to listen to Mabel's story. It's one of the most lovely stories I've heard about a lady who was incredibly lonely and is now seeing a very different world as a result of having a new digital window. One of the things that's very interesting about Mabel's story is there's also been a very significant change in her dependency on her local GP surgery as a result of that device. We've got stories of people up and down the country who are like Mabel and unlike Mabel, because there are people from all different age ranges, every life stage, from people who are employment seeking to people with young families, and those devices are making a very, very significant difference. Hafsha left us with a very powerful quote from Charles Dickens, which was around the fact that we'd given her 10 devices and actually she'd had very, very sleepless nights about what to do with those 10 and who to give them to. And she very compellingly said, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" And we're continuing to try and build the case for more funding for Devices.Now. So that was a very, I say heartwarming, but also quite heartbreaking moment on Thursday. And that takes us to today, and where are we? So across the course of the week, I was reflecting on this last night, and I've been left with a very strong sense of the engagement levels that we have within the coalition, that our strategic priorities are absolutely in the right territories, and that there is huge opportunity for us to do more. Debbie Forster closed the tools session with this quote from Winston Churchill around the need to never waste a good crisis. And I think what COVID-19 has shown us is the opportunity that would come from 100% digitally connected UK. And it certainly for me has reinforced our mission at Future.Now and the importance of that. So specifically empowering everyone to thrive in a digital UK. And on that note, I'd like to hand over to Peter and that panel conversation about how we really make that happen going forward.
Liz, thank you very much. And if I don't say this enough, I'm going to say it again. But on behalf of all of the coalition, thank you to you and the team who've put together this week. I think it has been a fantastic success. But as you rightly say, and particularly focusing on that 23% statistic, there is still a lot more to do. And it has been Digital Skills Week. So in addition to the series that we've put on through Future.Now, it's been a bumper week for a number of organisations. The Skills Builder Partnership launched their universal framework on Wednesday. And that very much positions digital skills as one of the 3 foundation skills on which and Tom will, I'm sure, talk about this more, articulate the broader essential skills that we need to thrive in education, work and life. Made Smarter and Engenuity and their partners launched a skills platform called Engaged, focusing really on the furloughed or at-rest engineers and other manufacturing staff, and taking the first steps to get them on a path of digitally upskilling and preparing for the rebound. DFE launched the skills toolkit, and again, useful to go online to the skills toolkit.campaign.gov.uk for more on that, and I'm sure Graham will tell us a little bit. But they were, whilst they launched that, BT has been running their top tips on tech as part of their Skills for Tomorrow programme. So a lot's happening, and certainly as we've heard this week, with the sort of the COVID crisis being a strong motive to get us all online, we are seeing a significant jump. Even this morning, they released sort of economic data that showed that online sales across multiple products were up 30%. Now that's largely not surprising given that we're all at home. And so for those that can, that is clearly their route to the market. But for those that can't, we still have a significant amount of work to do. So really to discuss where we are and how we take this forward and how we can continue with this journey, I'm delighted to be joined today by a panel of 5. Graham Henderson is the Deputy Director for Skills from DFE, and he is joined by Helen Milner, the CEO of Good Things Foundation, one of the founding partners of Future.Now, and a charity that really is reaching millions across the UK, and as part of our coalition is very much at the core of the rollout of Devices.Now. We've also delighted to welcome Pete Morey. Now, Pete's the head of digital impact and sustainability campaigns at BT, and I'm sure is going to share with us a few of those top tips. But BT has really been a core part of Future.Now and one of the main funders to date of Devices.Now. We're also delighted to welcome Tom Ravenscroft. Tom is the founder and CEO of Skills Builder Partnership, having spent a decade as a teacher, as well as leading Enabling Enterprise, and having done 1 or 2 classroom experiences where I've actually taught a class as part of sort of my extracurricular activities, I can say anybody who's managed to spend 10 years being a teacher deserves a massive applaud, because that's quite a challenge in its own right. And my final panelist today, not least, is Phil Smith, who is chair of IQE and the Digital Skills Partnership, having been CEO of Cisco. And equally importantly, one of his non-executive roles, Phil is the trustee or a trustee of Be The Business. So delighted to welcome my panelists. In terms of the format, I'm going to ask a few questions just to kick us off, but I'd like to hear from you, the audience. So please do use the chat box, or if as we get round to the open questions, if you prefer to answer or ask those questions live, again, please just sort of raise a hand or let me know and we'll bring you on. So perhaps turning, Phil, to you first, if I may. You've been a big advocate for digital skills. And looking at sort of various sectors, I mean, there's a perception that industries such as engineering and manufacturing should be equipped to be able to pivot to digital. I mean, we've seen Formula One and Dyson engaged in the ventilator challenge. Is our technology capability really ready for the challenge in these sectors?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and well done, everybody. Again, just to reiterate, what you've done has been a great week, and I think an exciting week for all the things that have happened. So, on the kind of manufacturing industrial sector, I think it is easy to look at it. We hear all these stories about robotic, manufacture, and we heard about the ventilator challenge and various other things that companies were pivoting immediately to be able to deal with some of those. But in fact, when you look at the underlying situation with that sector, you find actually it's one of the sectors that is lagging furthest in its capability to actually embrace digital. A lot about engineering is fantastic in the way they do things, but it's something that's built up a lot around accreditations and certifications and standards. I wouldn't necessarily say in all cases this is the most dynamic of industries. In many cases it can't. And there are some great examples, of course. You've quoted a couple there, but we hear about all the amazing manufacturing and engineering organizations, but there are many small companies who really find this extremely hard, and they have questions like, what is digital anyway? If you're a medium-sized, 20, 30 people manufacturer in Birmingham, who's sitting doing great stuff manufacturing particular widgets, I say, what does digital really mean to me? Why do I need it? And actually, it's a bit scary anyway. And then, of course, what you really come down to is, I don't have the skills. I don't even have the skills to engage with this. So there is a huge gap there. And I think it's something we need to continue to focus on. And obviously, what we launched at the beginning of this week as part of the Made Smarter program. And Made Smarter was kind of the UK's Industry 4.0. Germany made a big thing initially about Industry 4.0. They, with the Chancellor and so on, really focused on it. And UK didn't really have a kind of brand that rallied our manufacturing industrial sector together. And so we've been doing a number of work, and there's government support and so on for the work we're doing in Made Smarter, but the skills aspect of it has continued to be a challenge. Continue to say, how do we get those engineers to take the steps to get themselves digitally skilled, not just in 3D printing or all the fancy ends of it, but in cyber, on data usage, and all the things that are actually extremely important for anybody in the modern world. And of course, before the COVID crisis, the one big thing we're talking about all the time was automation, AI, machine learning, etc. That hasn't gone away. And if anything, it's probably got more extreme. Now we have to be more competitive and more agile. So it's an interesting sector with shining examples, but a huge way to go in many places where people really haven't taken the first steps at all. And I think we're trying to take the park run, couch to 5Ks, get out there, do something. The platform's got very basic stuff, but it can take you through lots of other things as well in a very sophisticated way.
I mean, Phil, you talk there about sort of digital and what does digital mean for me? I mean, maybe bringing Pete Morey in at this stage. I mean, Pete, BT have been running top tips on tech, but tech and digital, I mean, they're all encompassing terms and mean, as Phil said, sort of many different things. I mean, what does digital mean to you? I mean, how do we navigate this communication to be more inclusive and accessible?
So BT launched Skills for Tomorrow last year at a similar time to when Future.now was launched, really with the aim of helping 10 million people to make the most of life in the digital world. And so digital for us means that we're less focused on trying to foster the digital skills that people need to succeed in the world, and we're more focused on encouraging the skills that people need to thrive in the digital world. And I think that's an important distinction. Digital skills are really important, but actually what we're really motivated by are the skills that everybody needs in the digital world that we're living in. And I think as a result, that does mean that this is a very, very all-encompassing term and an all-encompassing agenda. And for us, it's about how we help people to make the most of life and to make the most of work. And that's why we need such a broad ecosystem of organisations involved in this agenda, all playing their part in helping people to develop the confidence and skills that they need at home and at work. And that's why Future.Now is so important and why BT is so pleased to be part of it. But it's also why initiatives like Top Tips on Tech are important. So BT launched this probably about a month ago now with ITV. It was a campaign that we ran with ITV as an advert takeover. We took over adverts twice a day during this morning and during the ITV evening news. And we brought well-known household names, people like David Walliams and Claire Balding, all delivering 3.5-minute short films with top tips on tech to help people right now. And I think we need mainstream campaigns like that that will reach new audiences in a way that larger brands and businesses like BT are able to do in partnership with big broadcasters like ITV, and tapping right into the needs that people have right now. But then at the other end, we need the sort of interventions that Phil's been talking about, the very specific interventions that people need to support them with the specific skills that they need at the moment. And one of the things that BT's been doing in that area has been to pivot our whole small business support agenda. We were running lots and lots of face-to-face support with small businesses up to when the coronavirus pandemic started, and we've shifted all of that online, and that's really providing very focused support to small businesses to adapt their business models to this new normal. And I think all of that's important. It's everything from that mainstream work right through to the very specialist support.
Great to see some questions coming through on the chat, but I'll bring those in a second. But I mean, again, building on something you said there, Pete, in the sense of the breadth of skills. I mean, Tom, maybe I can bring you in here because you've really, together with Business in the Community, one of your sponsors and others, I mean, you've really set about really the ambition to put more clarity around that skills framework. And obviously this week have launched the Universal Skills Framework itself. So, I mean, from your perspective, maybe sort of share a little bit about that and how the sort of the resources that are out there, how those dovetail into it, but equally how we communicate this more to get more people using it.
Absolutely. So the Skills Builder Universal Framework is what we've launched this week, and it's really been a collective effort, and it's bringing together organisations including people like Business in the Community, CBIPD, the CBI, Gatsby Foundation, and various others. And the idea is that actually we know that digital skills are going to be absolutely pivotal. That's why we're all here. But we also know that there's another really important, very complementary set of skills, which we call essential skills, but you could equally well call transferable skills or soft skills. And we know that really to thrive in the modern economy, you need both digital skills and you also need this wider set of skills. And so some of the skills that we focus on in the Skills Builder Universal Framework are things like teamwork, leadership, problem solving, creativity, aiming high, staying positive, and then being able to listen and to speak effectively. Now, of course, those are all skills that we all use every day. That's why they're essential. And actually, we use them whether we're thinking about our life or whether we're thinking about our work as well. But of course, they're also linked to digital skills because, and I think the Essential Digital Skills Framework is fantastic. But within that, of course, are things like how do you problem solve? How do you communicate with other people? And so I think what's really important is that we remember that there are digital skills, but there are also broader skills, and actually the two complement and reinforce each other.
Thanks, Tom. Let me just bring Helen and Graham in and then we'll open up to some of these questions coming in. I mean, to both of you, I mean, we've heard a lot this week about the fact that there is a lot of this training or skills available, a lot of it, frankly, online. And, you know, whilst in the pre-COVID situation, I mean, we sort of recognised sort of supply was far greater than demand. I mean, we've seen clearly an uptick in particularly those able to access online, accessing this training, you know, such as the DFE skills toolkit. But how do we take that momentum and drive real change, particularly for those that actually don't yet have access? In other words, the gap from where they are to what's out there. I don't know whether Helen, you want to go first, and then Graham.
Great, yes. So, I mean, there's been lots of things that have been really surprising due to COVID-19, and I've been working in sort of digital skills and digital inclusion for 20 years, and so it takes quite a lot to surprise me sometimes. But for me, we've seen sort of two very distinct groups of people rising to the fore who have needs during this crisis. So the first group are those that are struggling. 1.9 million households don't have access to the internet of any kind. So Devices.Now is helping them. People who were already had no skills or low skills, and for whom were completely cut off and suffering in many, many ways. And it's important, yes, older people who are shielding, very lonely, but also people of working age, unemployed, having to access universal credit, but having no technology to do it. So that group that I think of as sort of the struggling was struggling before, but it made so much worse because of the crisis. And then actually the second group are people who are in jobs, were furloughed or being asked to work from home, and who lacked essential digital skills. So they're very interesting. That we found during COVID-19, so we have two learning platforms, one called Learn My Way, one called Make It Click, that actually that 2/3 of the people who were registering on our platforms during this period were in jobs, and that they were not looking for a job. So it was this huge demand in getting new digital skills that we saw during COVID-19, and I found that really interesting. DFE launched the skills toolkit on the 28th of April, and I'll let Graham talk about that. But from our point of view on Learn My Way, so that's the very basics, that's where people can learn the very basic essential skills. We had 500,000 views in a matter of hours. Again, I was so staggered by that. And so we've been doing some survey work with those people who have registered with us since the 28th of April. You don't have to register, by the way, but they're the only ones we've got the email address for. And 79% of them have said that they're more interested in developing digital skills since COVID-19 and because of COVID-19. But I think it's important to realise this isn't all people who were being asked to work from home and couldn't cope, couldn't use Zoom, couldn't use online tools, but although some of them were in that category, but there was also quite a larger number of people who said, I now know I don't have the digital skills that I need for my job. And the CDI report, and I absolutely agree with Liz, so the Lloyd's Consumer Digital Index launched yesterday feels old because COVID has happened since they did their research, but that report said that 2/3 of all jobs require digital capability, and it'd be really interesting to see if that has also shot up because of it. So I think motivation has changed. The question really is, how do we make sure that we grasp hold of that? I think the fact that we've got evidence coming through that people are in jobs and that they know they need more digital skills for their current job, I think is really powerful evidence to take back to employers to say, we can help you. So Future.Now, others in the coalition can help employers to grasp this opportunity. And also to see that although I've painted these two groups in quite stark contrast, we do know that there are people still on minimum wage and low paid jobs, and we know from CDI yesterday that 70% of people in low income households lack essential digital skills. So for employers that they should look at their whole workforce, but from where I'm coming from, I think they would be the first place to focus.
And Graham, please do come in here, because I mean, obviously DFE's launched the essential digital skills entitlement, but I'm not sure yet that's that widely known. I mean, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the tool, the capabilities sort of arguably there, but you're...
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. And I guess, first of all, just to say, I agree with everything Helen said there, so I'll not try and repeat any of that. I guess there's a more pressing demand for these skills now, and we know there's so much brilliant provision out there. And I guess the really difficult part is that both those bits by themselves aren't enough. There's actually a lot we need to do to join those two together. People are overwhelmed by the amount of choice out there, don't know where to get started. You need to make sure there's really good, high quality information, advice and guidance to signpost people to the right provision, make use of platforms that join up provision and give people a sense of where to start on their journey, and give a sense of where a benchmark of quality. There's elements about making sure that people are really clear about what they get from the training that they're doing. We know that most adults are interested in training as a means to an end, and that if they are doing, if for most of them they want training that their employer is going to recognise and respond to, they see it as a way of getting a new job, getting a wage increase, getting promotion. And then obviously there's also a whole bunch of issues around making sure that provision is flexible and fits around people's lives and other responsibilities they have, and that there is access, that as many people as possible, everyone is able to access these opportunities, and things like Devices.now is really good in that space. In terms of the digital skills entitlement, yes, we definitely do need to do more to promote that. It actually comes on stream in August this year, and so we will make sure that we'll need to work with all of you to try and promote that as best as possible. And then just to say a very small amount on the digital skills, or so the skills toolkit. The aim was that if so many people stuck at home, we wanted to use that as an opportunity to showcase really good online learning and give people a place to start their journey where they may not know where to start, and picked a small selection of digital and numeracy courses that were of varying levels and varying lengths. And you worked with lots of employers and skills providers to try and create a really good course list, and ended up with courses from Open University, Google, Good Things Foundation, Cisco, Lloyds Bank, Institute of Coding. I haven't named all of them, but you see that actually quite a few are ones that have been involved in this Skills Week, which is really encouraging. And we've had a lot of take up of the offer, and we now need to work out and you get ideas from you guys and others about how we build on that.
So I'm getting a sense, and I'm getting questions coming in. And I think what I'd like to do is sort of split the conversation perhaps into two elements. One is around the business aspect and how employers upskill their employees. And then the second sort of element of questions are coming in really from those who at the moment don't have access to online, and therefore how do you access a lot of this material? So picking up Claire's question first, and not all the panel have to answer it, but maybe Phil and Pete, maybe Tom, you would have a view. So there is a lot of this material out here. What's the one thing that businesses should do to build digital skills? I mean, recognizing, Phil, you referenced the SMEs. I mean, there's 1 million SME businesses. What's the one thing they could do?
I think the truth is, Peter, the one thing they need to do is to get started on it. I mean, it is the metaphor we were using was the kind of, park run, couch to 5K. It's one of those things that, there's a million things you could do, marathons and triathlons and whatever, but just getting to the front door and starting to get out and, jog, walk, whatever it is a great start. And of course, those sorts of motivational oriented programs have been very successful at allowing people to do that sort of thing. Right now, we're not going to solve the problem of the plethora that Graham mentioned of huge numbers of different things out there, but I think there are some good ones. The skills toolkit, obviously the work, in specific sectors there. I think a lot of this is about exercising the muscles to start doing it. And I think if any business could get themselves onto, some of those courses on the skills toolkit, or if they're, specific industry into those areas, and just start doing it, they'll find suddenly that things will start to emerge. And, and so much experience of this in industry, having obviously run a tech and digital company for many years. When you start getting people doing things, it's amazing how much they then come back and try to do more. Not everybody, just like the park run, not everybody carries on doing it, but a level of them will continue, and then we'll look around and see other people go, I'd like to do that, I'd like to do that. And suddenly you get moving. And I think it's so important to take those first steps. And, I think, don't make it too complicated. Just pick something, get going and get started.
And Pete, what are your thoughts?
Well, the one thing that I would suggest is listen to your workforce. So understanding actually where your workforce are at on digital skills, what's their current capability, what are their motivations, why would they care about developing their own digital skills, and what's their motivation to develop them. And then to Helen's point really as well, making sure that when you're listening to the breadth of your workforce. So this shouldn't be something only about senior managers within companies. This should go right the way through your workforce onto the front line. And I think it's equally important to listen to your workforce about their needs from a digital skills perspective in terms of their daily lives as well as their workforce needs. Because for some, it may well be about the everyday digital skills that they need to be able to function in a whole range of other ways, rather than the specialist skills that they need to be able to move on in their career. And you'll only know that by actually undertaking an exercise where you hear what your workforce is saying and adapt your offer as a result of that.
And Tom, you're connected obviously with Business in the Community, again, which is another sort of charity that obviously has far-reaching links into business. I mean, how are you going to get them to pick up that wealth of value that's sitting within the Skills Builder partnership?
So when we launched on Wednesday, we have already got 120 employers who are at various stages of implementing the Skills Builder approach. And I think what's been really critical, I guess, are I'd say three big things. So I think the first one is that there's a real need to keep this whole space simple. I think it's very easy for it to become very complex and very, everyone has slightly different definitions of things and uses slightly different language, sometimes deliberately as a sort of a point of, distinction. But what we've found time and again is that actually for anybody to build their skills, they need to have a really concrete grasp of what it looks like to build skills, whether that's digital skills, whether that's broader essential skills. And so actually keeping a really simple, consistent language around these skills is really critical. And I think linked to that is the idea that, I think employers who are embracing this are embracing it not just because it's good for their workforce immediately, but as a way of supporting individuals to thrive across their lives. And so actually, there's also a need for alignment. So not just doing something that works in your organization alone, but thinking about, well, what are some of the broader skills and can I join this up to what else is going on? And I think that's what's so powerful about the Future.Now coalition, is that idea that actually we're all contributing to something, and that alignment is really crucial. And then I think finally, on this I'd echo Phil, is the idea that actually you just get going with it. And this is, everybody can build their skills to a higher level, irrelevant of whether you're just starting out in your career or whether you've been doing the same role for a long time. And I think all of us, everyone on the panel included, we should be humble about the fact that we're also all trying to build our skills as well. We're always trying to develop those. And I think I see employers who do this really well model that behaviour all the way from the boardroom right down to people working on the front line, that actually it's a shared investment in developing these skills.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to switch, obviously conscious of time, switch to the other half of the, well, another part of the agenda, and Jonathan B and a few others of you are raising this aspect, which is, so the fact that we've got 1.9 million households that don't have connectivity, and that's a responsibility largely we all share. So what are some of the ideas? I mean, Jonathan's sort of posing one idea around sort of a national register. Obviously that can't be online, because the people who need to register won't be online, but it could at least start to create a platform of information, maybe through DCMS or a government body that starts to be a repository protecting data protection, all the rest of it, for organisations to help. I mean, I don't know, Graham, Helen, whether you've got any views as to whether getting that sense of scale and using that as a framework to drive the reduction in that 1.9 million. Graham.
Do you want me to go first? Yeah. So I think that is definitely something that should be looked at. And I guess what I would say though is that we should try and make use of some of the infrastructure out there at the moment. So that is the Digital Skills Partnership, and DCMS will be able to help through that. There's also now 36 skills advisory panels set up across the country, where we're trying to make sure that providers and employers and local authorities are all working together to address the skills challenges. And that goes beyond digital skills, but digital skills is an incredibly important part of that. We're also working with institutions like the Good Things Foundation on how digital delivery mechanisms need to change in response to COVID-19. Just very briefly, just on the previous question, effectively, this is something that DFE is incredibly interested in. We want to make most of the training that is done for adults is done by employers, not by government, and we need to make sure that we're making sure that they're doing the best training and increasing the amount of funding they're putting into training. And we're also trying to make sure that they feel far more a part of the skills system. So all of our new qualifications like apprenticeships and T-levels, we're designing with employers, and you end up at the end not with a sort of a more generic qualification, but a list of competencies that say, if it's for an electrician, saying that you can wire a house to this standard and do this to safely, and kind of being really clear what you get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, Helen, you've got a great reach already. I mean, bluntly, do you know the 1.9 million, and it's now about funding and getting coalition support, government support to funding it, or do we still not actually know who they individually are?
So we know who they are. I don't think I'd actually completely guarantee that I know all 1.9 million, but we know a large proportion of them. And also I think that there was something in the question about, because people aren't doing it face-to-face anymore. I think that's one of the things I've been so impressed with, is the community organisations now pivoting themselves to do support by telephone and online. I mean, it's amazing that we have community organisations helping people who have never used the internet learn how to use the internet for the first time remotely, because that's exactly what's happening right now off the back of devices.now. So the device being the thing that allows them to do that. So the 1.9 million households are ones who don't have access. So actually, right now, without libraries and coffee shops and online centres and McDonald's not being open and being able to use that free Wi-Fi, that's why we know who they are, because they've been crying out for help. They're saying, please help us. We need to organise our medicines to be delivered. We need to be organising food parcels to be delivered. We need to stay in touch with friends and family. So that we've just been so overwhelmed with demand, and this is hand in hand with devices.now. The other thing that I think is really important to call out is data poverty. So through the Devices.now campaign, we've discovered that there are many people who have who may have a device, normally a smartphone, but who just can't afford to top up their data. And we're hearing about people who are choosing between food and data. And it feels there really must be creative ways that together, all of us, government, industry, the community sector, how we could all work together to see if there are ways that we can gift data or share data. So ways that we really make sure that we get to those 1.9 million people, because we can support people to develop those basic digital skills. We can get them to that starting line that Liz talks about to get those essential digital skills. We definitely have a huge volunteer base, a huge number of community organisations that can help right now. But actually the thing those 1.9 million people lack is the access. And so with Devices.now, we've set that up, but we're just actually waiting for funds to come through. We've had some great support from BT, Lloyds, Essentia and others, but really we need more money, and it would be great if the government could get behind that as well.
Well, look, turning perhaps just to the last bit of the conversation before we reach close. I mean, Robert Walker's asking a question here and touching on sort of both the sort of the universal basic entitlement and how it's sort of the richness of it by being sort of drawn from sort of the community. Gori is also asking questions around the various levels of skill. So I suppose, I mean, question partly for you, Graham. Is there appetite within the sort of the skills toolkit for collaboration for private sector components to be added into that? And I suppose, Tom, how do you see that in the sense if you've created a sort of a universal skills framework, but again, there are lots of other providers. So how can we create a greater sense of sharing and sort of coming together to tackle this challenge?
Yes, yes, I think very good question. So first of all, just in terms of the, can you add into the skills toolkit? Well, so the list of courses we have is there's 13 courses, and they've been picked through lots of collaboration with businesses and digital skills specialists, and we've tried to keep the list as short as we possibly can to not overwhelm people with choice. We are going to add a couple of additional courses to meet gaps that have been highlighted within the next couple of weeks. But we do have to look at how this joins up with everything else. So there is a page on the skills toolkit which lists all of the other free stuff that's out there, and absolutely we'd be keen to add in other good free resource out there, so we can definitely add it there. And then I guess one of the other issues is we have things even in government like the National Career Service, the National Retraining Scheme, the Skills Toolkit, and then lots of great initiatives outside government, and how we try and bring them together and try and pull everything into one place, I think would be really valuable. Easier said than done, but definitely worth trying.
Well, Tom's there to help.
Yeah, and I think in terms of collaboration, I think that has to be critical. So with the Skills Builder framework that is freely available for anybody to use, you don't need a login, you don't need a username, you don't need to do anything. So that's all freely available on our website, and I'll pop the link in the chat in a second. And it's also free for people to use for commercial and non-commercial use, because frankly we want to try to create a much more joined up approach to everybody building these essential skills, which obviously sit alongside the digital skills as well. So yeah, and I think that's the spirit of Future.now, right? Is that we can all do this if we all chip in and do our bit together.
Brilliant. Well, look, bringing this session to a close, really ask each of the panelists sort of maybe just sort of for one final set of remarks, short, pithy. I could imagine where Phil might start, which is just go and get something done, do something. But maybe turning to Pete first, because you're on my right-hand side of my screen, Pete. Sort of final comments.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we now face is how we maintain momentum. not only through the continuing crisis with coronavirus, but as we start to transition out. And we've talked a lot about the new motivations that people have to build their digital skills during this week, and that's really exciting. I think we need to find ways now together to make sure that as we transition out of this period, that we're still engaging those people who've started to walk towards digital skills in a way that they haven't before. And so I think that's a really critical area for all of us to think about. How do we maintain that in the coming months and the next year?
Helen?
This is exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say that there's a silver lining in this crisis, you know, and that actually that people, digital skills is one of them, that people have developed their own digital skills by themselves through necessity. People are much, much more motivated. We also know the scale of the problem for those people at the bottom end, those people who lack the access but also lack the very basic digital skills and are very cut off. So we have a lot more evidence, we have a lot more people who are interested, and so I think that when we talk about the country's recovery, I think that we really need to make sure that we've got a clear plan how to capitalise on that. But I think it's a positive, I think it's a positive move, because I think one thing that's going to happen because of this crisis is that people now know that lacking digital skills is a very real thing. They won't cloud over anymore when I'm talking about it. It's a very, very real thing. I think everybody has experienced it. Everybody knows a family member, and hopefully we can harness that to make sure that we can keep the momentum up after the crisis is finished.
Yeah. Graham?
You know, the skills system is quite complicated and diverse. We need to provide direction and clarity for individuals and employers. Having a common message in terms of the benefits of digital skills, having a clear joint agreement on what the evidence and user insights say, and a clear view on where to go for the best stuff, then will help individuals and employers navigate the system.
We're certainly going to help to achieve that. Phil?
Yeah, I mean, as Helen said, I think we've done things in the last few weeks that were never seemed possible. I mean, it would have been, you know, tens of years to get some of these things done. And I think, to Graham's point, our real opportunity now is to continue to crowd in, to park our egos. You know, if you've got initiatives that can work with others to do it, you know, it is a moving target. You know, we have got new things that are, you know, people being isolated digitally because there's more digital there now, you know, so it's a moving part of it, but it's absolutely critical for our society, not only to get, you know, have 1.9 million people who don't have access is just crazy. And then, but also from an economy perspective, you know, we are still lagging in productivity versus many, many others. And the two things we find that are crucial in that are leadership skills and technology and digital adoption. And if we don't get better at that, we have got a competitive gap against many, many other countries. And I think, you know, in this bounce back better scenario, we've got to do a much better job of this. And digital is now right at the top of it, I think.
And Tom?
So I think my final thought is that I'm a big fan of a framework, because I think what it does is it means that everybody is speaking the same language, and it means that we can really align, and it therefore means that all of our individual efforts add up to much more than the sum of their parts. And I think, you know, that's what's been so encouraging about this week, is I think seeing the momentum and the energy behind, you know, aligning efforts to make a real change.
Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the close of this webinar. So first, my sincere thanks to all of you, not only for joining today, but for joining this week. Obviously, a particular thanks to our panelists, to Phil, Tom, Helen, Pete and Graham, to Liz Williams and the Future.Now team, who've done a fantastic job, largely behind the scenes, putting all of this together. And on that note, whilst we'll finish the session formally in a minute, we'll leave it open, the platform open for a short while, obviously for people to pick up the links on the chat, but also do go to our website. I'd also like to close by thanking our coalition partners. You know, it's been a great week in drawing some of the experience and the learning. Some great quotes have come from our partners, but I hope that each of you have also taken something away. And if you're not already a member of the coalition, please do join us. There's much more to gain from this, whether actually giving something into the coalition or drawing from it. So please do encourage others also to join the network. It's free to join, and it very much is one of how we grow together. In terms of the forward agenda, please save the date for our annual coalition meeting on the 8th of October. But for now, have a great bank holiday and thank you for joining us. Bye for now.
Thanks.